3 dark phases that break every chosen one before their spiritual awakening. I want you to imagine something with me. Not a temple, not a cave, not a mountaintop, but your life right now. The way it has unfolded, the way it has broken, the way it has healed just enough to function now. I want you to ask yourself one terrifyingly honest question. What if everything that went wrong in your life was not a mistake, but a precise initiation? A spiritual curriculum so exact, so tailored, that only you could walk it. And what if I told you that before any chosen one awakens, they must first descend into 3 dark phases, each one designed not to destroy them, but to break them open? The first phase is the sacred breakdown. And I say sacred because no one ever tells you that breaking down is holy. No one teaches you that depression, isolation, failure, and losing everything you thought you were is not the end. It's the beginning. It's the first key. This phase doesn't announce itself like a spiritual teacher. It arrives like a betrayal, like heartbreak, like watching your dreams burn in front of you while you're powerless to stop it. And yet, if you look closely, if you sit still long enough in the ruins, you'll start to hear something. A whisper, a distant echo that says, "This is necessary."
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
Why do we have to break before we awaken? Because ego is strong, identity is stubborn, the illusion of control is addictive, and the universe, God, source, whatever name you give it, knows that the only way to introduce you to your true self is to strip away everything that is not you. Have you noticed how we fight this process? We cling to relationships that expired years ago. We stay in jobs that suffocate our soul. We lie to ourselves just to feel normal, but life doesn't care about your comfort. Life cares about your evolution. And so, it will burn the house down if that's what it takes for you to see that you were never the house in the first place. Here's the paradox. When your life begins to fall apart, something ancient in you begins to wake up. And you know exactly what I'm talking about, that feeling of, this can't be it. There has to be more. It's not just a thought, it's a vibration, a signal from your soul that says, you were never meant to live asleep, but before you can rise, you have to face the fire. You have to meet the version of yourself that is addicted to the mask, the lies, the need for external validation, and that meeting is brutal. I remember my own breakdown. I was surrounded by people yet completely alone. I had everything society told me I should want, yet I felt like I was dying inside. No one saw it. No one could hear me screaming inside my own skin. Because I wore the mask so well, even I forgot what I looked like beneath it. And then the universe did what it always does to chosen ones. It pulled the rug out. One by one, it took everything. My comfort, my certainty, my direction, and all that remained was silence. Emptiness. A void so profound I thought I had failed at life itself. But here's the insane part. That was the most divine moment of my life, because in the silence, I finally heard my soul speak. It didn't speak in words, it spoke in knowing, in the kind of truth you don't learn from books. It told me, you are not broken. You are being broken open. And in that moment, I realized something that changed everything. Pain is not punishment. Pain is purification. You see, we've been taught that suffering is a sign of failure, that something is wrong with us if we feel lost, depressed, or disconnected. But let me ask you something. What if those feelings are not signs of failure, but signs of awakening? What if only those who are meant to transcend the illusion are gifted the pain to wake them up? That's why I call it the sacred breakdown, because it's not random, it's not cruel, it is precise, it is intentional, and it is universal among all chosen ones. Have you ever noticed this pattern in people who truly awaken? They all have a story, a moment when life completely dismantled them, a death of the old self, and that death always precedes the birth of the awakened self. It's almost as if the universe has a blueprint for awakening, and the first step is always destruction. But not destruction for the sake of chaos, destruction for the sake of truth. So, if you are in this phase right now, if you feel like everything is falling apart, I want you to breathe deeply. Inhale the chaos. Exhale the fear. Because you are not being punished, you are being prepared. Your current darkness is not the absence of light. It is the womb of transformation. And I know it hurts. I know it feels endless. But I promise you, one day, you will look back and realize this was the moment you were reborn. Do you want to know something crazy? Every single spiritual master, mystic, and awakened being throughout history had to endure this phase. The Buddha left everything, starved, and sat in silence under a tree for 49 days. Jesus went into the desert and was tempted by every shadow in his psyche. Even modern-day seekers have to lose everything before they find anything real. That's not coincidence. That's the path, and you, my friend, are walking it now. You are not behind, you are not broken, you are not cursed. You are being initiated. So let me ask you something that may shake your core. What if the worst thing that ever happened to you was the best thing that ever happened for you? Think about that. Not just intellectually, but emotionally. What if the breakdown wasn't just necessary, it was sacred? What if your suffering is the very evidence that you are being called into something greater? There's a moment in every chosen one's journey where they realize the old life is no longer compatible with the new self that's emerging. That moment is terrifying because it means letting go of everything you thought you were. But it is also the moment of power, because what comes next is not just survival, it is awakening. And not everyone gets there, only those who refuse to numb it, escape it, or fake it. Only those who face their darkness with open eyes. Are you one of them? The sacred breakdown is not the end, it is the doorway. And if you're walking through it right now, I honor you. I bow to the courage it takes to not run, because the world needs more awakened souls. And you, yes, you, are becoming one. The silent war, when the universe goes quiet and you doubt everything. There comes a point after the breakdown, after the initial collapse of everything you thought defined your life, when the storm settles. You expect clarity, you expect answers, maybe even a divine voice saying, "You made it, you passed the test." But instead what you get is silence. Deafening, confusing, soul-shaking silence. And this is where the second dark phase begins, a phase I call the silent war, because it is not fought outside of you, It is not loud or dramatic. It is quiet, it is invisible, and yet it is one of the most brutal phases any chosen one must face before their spiritual awakening. Why is it a war? Because every day in this silence you battle your own mind. You wake up not knowing who you are anymore. The old version of you is gone, but the new version hasn't fully arrived. You feel like a ghost in your own life, walking through familiar places with unfamiliar eyes. And worst of all, the guidance you were expecting, the voice of the universe, the signs, the synchronicities, they all seem to vanish. Where once you felt connected to something greater, now you feel abandoned, forgotten, lost. And this is the test. You see, the silent war is not about the absence of signs. It's about what you do when the signs disappear. It's about the strength to continue walking even when the path is no longer lit. It's about learning to trust your inner compass when every external source of validation has gone quiet. This is the phase where the ego screams, "You made a mistake. Go back. This path is nonsense." And yet, something deeper in you whispers, "Keep going," and that whisper is everything. What makes this phase so painful is the doubt. You begin to question whether your pain meant anything at all, whether your breakdown was just random suffering, not sacred transformation, whether you're actually awakening or if you're just losing your mind. The silence creates space, and that space becomes a breeding ground for fear. You start to ask, did I misread the signs? Was I ever really chosen? What if this is all just in my head? And yet, let me tell you something that only those who've walked this path can confirm. The silence is not emptiness. It is incubation. It is the sacred void where your soul begins to rebuild itself without interference. The universe goes quiet not to punish you, but to grow you. Because if you only follow the signs, you're not really free. You're still dependent. But when you learn to walk through the silence with faith, with trust, with presence, that's when true awakening begins. Have you ever sat in complete stillness and felt the weight of your own existence pressing down on you? Not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're finally being invited to sit with what you've always avoided, yourself. That's what the silent war is. It's the part of the journey where all distractions are stripped away. No more spiritual highs, no more emotional validation, just you and the raw, unfiltered truth of your being. And here, in this rawness, something incredible happens. Slowly, without warning, you begin to notice a shift. Your sensitivity heightens. You begin to feel energies, not just emotions. You begin to see life not just through your eyes, but through your soul. You become aware of patterns, ancestral, karmic, collective, that were once invisible. You start to hear the universe again, but not in words, in frequencies, in feelings, in knowing. But here's the catch. This only happens after you stop demanding answers. Let that sink in. The universe goes silent, so you stop seeking noise. So you stop chasing external wisdom and start remembering your internal wisdom. Because the truth is, you were never meant to be led by signs forever. You were meant to become the sign. But that identity cannot emerge until you've been emptied, until the old self dies and the new self is strong enough to walk without applause, without approval, without proof. So let me ask you something that might change how you see this phase. Can you still keep walking when no one is watching? Can you still believe in your path when the universe seems to have gone mute? Because if you can, you are no longer a seeker. You are becoming a master. The silent war doesn't end with a victory parade. It ends with a quiet knowing, a shift so subtle you might miss it if you're waiting for fireworks. But the moment you stop resisting the silence, the moment you stop needing reassurance, a deep peace emerges. Not the peace of ignorance, but the peace of alignment. You finally realize, I don't need to hear the universe speak. I am the echo of its voice. This is where faith matures into knowing, where belief dissolves into being, and where the chosen one begins to realize that the journey is not about finding the light. It's about realizing you are the light that never left. Even in silence, especially in silence. The shadow mirror when you must face the darkness within you. There is a moment in the journey after the breakdown has stripped you bare and the silent war has tested your faith, when the universe presents you with something even more terrifying than pain or silence. It shows you, not the version you've curated for the world, not the version you idealize in your mind, but the raw, unfiltered, unguarded truth of who you are beneath every mask, belief, and memory. This is the third dark phase that every chosen one must pass through before awakening fully. I call it the shadow mirror, because it does not reflect back your light. It reflects your hidden darkness. And it demands that you look, not to judge, not to fix, but to finally see. You see, most people spend their entire lives running from their shadow, avoiding discomfort, ignoring their triggers, blaming others, projecting their pain. But the spiritual path is not about escaping darkness. It's about integrating it. And that cannot happen until you face it directly. The shadow mirror doesn't show up in meditation or peaceful silence. It shows up in conflict, in jealousy, in rage, in shame. It shows up in the parts of yourself you've rejected, disowned, or suppressed. And it asks one question: can you love this too? The reason this phase breaks so many is because it doesn't feel spiritual. It feels messy. It feels like regression. After all the peace you touched in the silence, this descent feels like failure. But it's not. It's the final purification. Because no one awakens fully while still carrying unprocessed shadows. And the truth is, the deeper your light, the darker your shadow. Not because you are bad, but because awakening illuminates everything. At the darkest point in your life, the real purification begins. And at the darkest point in your life, the darker your shadow, not because you are bad, but because awakening illuminates everything, and what you don't face will continue to control you. From the shadows. This is why so many on the path get stuck here. They want the light, but they don't want to face what's hidden in their own basement. But you can't skip this step. You can't bypass your own soul. Because what's hidden in the shadow isn't just pain, it's power, it's potential. It's the parts of you that were never loved, never heard, never seen. And now they are rising, not to destroy you, but to be integrated, to be healed, to be transformed. What does it look like to face your shadow? It looks like seeing your patterns and owning them without blame. It looks like feeling your anger without turning it into violence. It looks like sitting with your jealousy and asking, what part of me feels unworthy? It looks like meeting your own manipulations and saying, I don't need to do this anymore. It's about radical honesty, radical compassion, radical courage. But here's the paradox. The moment you stop running from your shadow, it stops chasing you. The moment you embrace your darkness, it stops controlling you. Because your shadow is not your enemy, it is your teacher. It is the part of you that has been waiting for your love. And when you give it that love, something miraculous happens. You become whole. Let me ask you something uncomfortable but powerful. What are you pretending not to feel? What truth about yourself are you avoiding because it scares you? That truth is your doorway. That fear is your compass. Because the deeper you go into the shadow, the more light you unlock. Not because the light is added, but because it was always there, hidden behind what you were too afraid to see. In the shadow mirror, you don't find enlightenment. You find authenticity. And that authenticity becomes the foundation of your awakening. Because spiritual awakening is not about floating above life. It's about becoming fully grounded in your truth. It's about walking the earth with your head in the stars and your heart in the fire of your own humanity. No longer pretending, no longer hiding, just being fully, fiercely, freely you. When you emerge from this final dark phase, you are no longer just a seeker, you are a vessel, a bridge between the worlds, a living embodiment of what it means to rise, to fall, to face yourself, and to awaken, not in perfection, but in presence. The rise of the chosen, when everything you lost becomes the gift you give. After the breakdown, after the silence, and after the shadow, something begins to shift, not outside, but within. It doesn't come with fireworks. It comes like a calm sunrise after a lifetime of storms. You wake up one day and realize you're no longer waiting for the pain to end, or for the silence to break, or for the darkness to pass. You're no longer resisting the process, you've become part of it, and in that moment you begin to rise, not as who you were, but as who you've always been beneath the noise. This is the rise of the chosen, when everything you lost becomes the very thing you now offer the world. You see, awakening isn't about escaping the world, it's about returning to it, with eyes that now see the divine in everything. It's about walking through the same streets, seeing the same people, but from an entirely new dimension of awareness. Suddenly, you are no longer the victim of your story, you are its author. You are no longer waiting to be saved, you are the one who's saved. And not just yourself, but others too. Because once you've survived the fire, your life becomes the lighthouse for those still burning in theirs. And here's the beautiful twist. All the pain you thought would destroy you, all the losses you thought you'd never recover from, all the silence you once cursed, those become your medicine, your wisdom, your power, not because the pain disappears, but because it has been alchemized. What was once your wound becomes your gift. What was once your fear becomes your depth. And now you carry it, not as baggage, but as light, a kind of light that can only come from those who have walked through the dark and made it back with their soul intact. This is the moment when you realize you were never broken, you were being sculpted, and now, as the chosen one, You carry something the world desperately needs: truth. And not just the truth of words or ideas, but the truth of lived experience. The truth of someone who has faced the void and dared to become whole. You don't preach from a mountaintop, you embody the mountain. You don't just share teachings, you are the teaching. But let me tell you this, rising doesn't mean life will be perfect. It means you are now anchored in something deeper than circumstance. You will still be tested, you will still feel pain, but now you respond from presence, not panic. You move with intention, not impulse. You love without needing to possess. You serve without needing to be seen. Because you know deep in your bones that the journey was never about becoming someone new. It was about remembering who you've always been. So let me ask you something sacred. Who are you now without the pain, without the mask, without the fear? If you let go of everything that was never yours to carry, what truth would remain? That truth, that essence, that is the gift you now bring to the world, and the world needs it more than ever. It needs people who have walked through darkness and learned to see in the dark. It needs people who are no longer trying to change others, but who become the change through the way they live. It needs chosen ones who have been broken open, emptied out, and filled with a love that cannot be explained, only expressed. This is your rising, not as someone superior, not as someone with all the answers, but as someone who finally understands that awakening was never about escaping the human experience. It was about embracing it fully with a holy heart. And so the journey comes full circle. You fell, you lost, you broke, you healed, you remembered, and now you rise. Not for yourself alone, but for everyone who still thinks their pain is the end. You rise because you are living proof that the fire doesn't just burn, it refines. That silence doesn't just isolate, it reveals. That shadows don't just haunt, they hold the keys. You rise because you are no longer asleep. You are awake. And now you become the awakening for others.